Bob Schmidt Show on today's Talk 1490. It is 8:38. Good morning. You know, you'd think the temperature would have warmed up a little bit. It's actually stayed steady. 29 holding steady. 44 expected later on this afternoon, as we just heard from Bill Grawl. My next guest is, well, a famous rock star. But the weird thing is that he's up, and this is a live interview. It's 8:38 lacrosse time, 6:38 California time. Chris Hillman, thank you for joining us this morning. So what happened to the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s, my man?
Hi, Bob. Good morning. You know what? That really didn't appeal to me. I was always a musician, and I still sort of cringe when somebody says rock star. And I go, So, yes, I had areas in the last 40, 50 years where I made some bad choices. Mm-hmm. I'll say that. But as far as making it a lifestyle, a lot of people I knew exchanged the success of the music. They swapped it off for a hedonistic lifestyle, where it became the career. And I lost a lot of good people. But I always just loved playing music, and I had a wonderful time. And I thought I was retired a year ago, but something happened.
So I want to ask you a question. You said that you cringe when somebody says rock star. What would you title yourself as?
As sort of minimalistic as it sounds, I'm just a musician. I'm really a folk musician, a folk singer. That's where I came out of, bluegrass, traditional folk music. But it's funny. I guess I was so blessed, Bob, to be a part of the Byrds, right?
Right.
So whatever I do, it's a bad joke, but if I found a cure for cancer, the ex-Byrds cures cancer. So I always say I'll never get out of the nest, but being in the Byrds was fantastic, and it was a great band. I'm proud of all that we did, and so yes, and in a sense, though we weren't rock stars, we were, but all of us came out of folk music, which is funny. We weren't a garage rock band, So yeah, so hey, people can call me whatever they want. I don't really care.
Chris Hillman joining us this morning here on today's Talk 1490. I invited Ron Revere into the studio with me as well, Chris. Ron is our sales manager here, and when he heard I was talking to you, he's like, I'm sitting in the studio with you, and I'm like, well, all right. So he actually has a question he'd like to ask.
Well, no, I just find Chris, I find it ironic that you were just a few moments talking about not being a rock star, and then you turn around and write one of the most cynical, iconic, so you want to be a rock and roll star. I find that really interesting, the juxtaposition of those points. So, yeah,
it was funny. Well, I guess it was cynical, but in a very lighthearted way, and we put that song together. Here we were, Roger McGuinn and I were all early 20s. I was 22 or 23 or 4. And we had been around the block, so to speak, with a couple of hit records and everything. So we're like old men pointing, looking back at it all. But in all lightheartedness, yeah. No, I love that song. It's one of my favorite tracks we ever cut. And then Tom Petty did a wonderful cover of that song on one of his albums. So.
I want to bring in and ask about Tom Petty, because I know Tom Petty and the Eagles have mentioned that the Byrds were an influence. Which of the bands that were influenced by the Byrds and basically in you and your work are you most proud of?
Well, of course, I would go with Tom and the Heartbreakers. Uh-huh. And because initially when they started out in Gainesville, Florida, they were sounding just like the Byrds, and we're doing a lot of Byrds songs. And then when they started to develop their songs, they took our sound and really elevated it up about 10 notches up the ladder. But Tom always, throughout his life, would acknowledge the Byrds as an influence, which was really nice and a wonderful man. And then, the West Coast sound, we were there pretty early in 1964. And the Eagles, of course, came along and did a wonderful job. They're still going strong.
Right.
So it was all based on 2 and 3 part vocal harmony, not unlike the Beach Boys, not unlike the East Coast Four Seasons in a sense. Different kind of music, but yeah. So I think a lot of people. The best legacy we left, Bob, is that we got accolades and from other groups. came along and said that the Byrds influenced us. Even the Beatles did a song in our as a tribute to us. If I Needed Someone, which George Harrison wrote, which was really a tribute to the Byrds.
Wow.
You can't go for anything more than that. So far more worthwhile than a big bank account to me is leaving an artistic legacy for people to follow.
Right. Well, you mentioned the bank account. Let me ask this: does it disappoint you when you look at your checkbook and you say, "Oh, damn it, I don't have the money that some of these guys that are touring today have," or I look at some of the one-hit wonders that have done just one song that had a pop, and then all of a sudden, they've got multi-millions, and here you're one of the founders, and no,
I'll tell you why. First of all, what do you do with what you made? Okay, so I had someone sit me down in 1970. I was 24, and explain to me basic economics. He said, "You're going to get paid in gross amounts." Everybody out there listening to the radio, listen to me. You get paid in gross amounts. He said, half of that money is the government.
Right.
He was overestimated. And from that day on, I knew people, Bob, that would get a royalty check and go into and buy a car with it, with the check. And I used to have discussions. Half that money is the government. You're going to have a problem later on. What I did and what I made as a songwriter, which is really how I made a great living as a songwriter, I was taught and shown how to invest and do things like that. But there's really nothing I want anymore. So if I look at someone, I don't think that way. I don't think he's making millions of dollars.
Right.
But what do I want? I don't want anything. I have a wonderful family. I really do. I'm 73 years old. I'm blessed to be able to go play music, and people want to hear me. That's what it's all about.
Chris, I jokingly would say to you, this is Ron Revere again, I went through puberty with you. So, I feel a special...
you got to go take a shower now.
I feel a special connection because I'm 62, and I kind of came out on the latter stage of the Byrds. Rock and roll star, that song means I was, 6th grade, and I wanted to be a rock and roll star then. And, I kind of followed your musical legacy through Manassas, which the first Manassas record, which I think is one of the greatest pieces of music ever put together.
Thank you.
In your collaboration with Stephen Stills, and I still can go on YouTube, and there's that 40-minute German music show that I'll watch, if you remember that you guys were on, and then you kind of, then you went to the super group, Souther Hillman Furay, and then all the way up to McGuinn, Clark, and Hillman, and you've had just a fantastic musical journey, and it's just been amazing along the way that, the legacy is the Byrds, but even after that, you've created such wonderful music, and even into your solo career, which, even at 73 years old, you're still cranking it out.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I thought I was retired last year, and then Tom came along, and Teddy, and he was wanting to do this record with me, and I grilled him. I said, "You sure you want to do this?" He said, if you want me to, I want to. And that was one of the nicest things in the world. But the last conversation I had, and I said, "Tom, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you did." I said, I think this is a great end of a last album for me. He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm not done with you yet." He says, "We're going to do a rock album next." I said, "Okay, well, unfortunately, the poor man passed away. But what a wonderful guy he was. I could go on for an hour about it. As the most, and you talk about rock stars. Here's Tom Petty, one of the biggest stars in the country, in the world. One of the most humble people I've ever come across. I mean, seriously, never had an attitude of any kind. It wasn't just because he was friends of me, but I mean, it was just everybody said that. He was mourned very much because of his accessibility to people. He was every man's guy, He's just a great guy. Anyway, so there we go.
Chris, do you think that a lot of musicians are misunderstood? That maybe they think that the maybe standoffishness is a-holeness rather than just being a performer?
Well, I do agree that, if you get to that huge level, I prize my anonymity, right? I do.
Right.
I like to go out, and I don't want any. So, there is that part of where people. Tom would go on the road. He couldn't go out of his hotel room.
Right.
Seriously, could not go out of his hotel room, and that's a tough trade-off. But it's not a platform, be you an actor or a musician, for you to tell people how to vote, how to act. You're not up there. Your job is to entertain people, to make people feel good, to take them away from their everyday troubles. That's what your job is. I don't want to go and see a musician in concert or anything and have somebody start pontificating on political areas they don't know anything about anyway. You know what I'm saying? So that's the one thing I go, wait, hold on, everything. Just sing the song.
Right.
Just sing the song, yeah.
Chris, you've performed a lot of songs and you've written a lot of songs. What song of yours are you most proud of?
Gosh almighty. Well, I do love Rock and Roll Star. I as far as something I wrote, but I still perform a song the Byrds did in 1965, The Bells of Rimney, which was it was a Welsh poem that Pete Seeger put music to. Now, Pete Seeger was our wonderful divine presence that he brought. We got turn off of what Pete Seeger had done,
right?
Biblical scripture, and then Bells of Rimney, which I love that song. If anybody listens to the first Byrds album and listens to Bells of Rimney, that's what the Byrds was all about musically. That was the essence of the Byrds sound, was Bells of Rimney. So I love that song. And I mean, certain things I'll just always continue to do. I mean, there's a song called Love Reunited that I wrote 25 years ago that was the first top 10 hit in country music on the Billboard charts. I still record that. I still do that song too. But yeah, there's a couple of them I think I got through.
You know, people in the La Crosse area are going to have an opportunity to see you, of course, on the 21st of April at the Heider Center for the Arts in West Salem. Do you know if tickets are still available, Ron?
I believe they still are, from last I heard.
Okay.
Well, I hope folks come out because Beyond Me, it's a fundraiser for the American Legion Post. So that's a good thing.
Right.
And we will be there in all of our glory. And we will do, Bob and Ron, we will do songs from the last 55 years of my career, from the Byrds to the Flying Burrito Brothers, to McGuinn Clark Hillman, beyond into Desert Rose Band, which is actually the last big band I had that was very successful on country music.
How did you and Herb end up hooking up for this concert?
Well, Herb and I go back to 1963. We met each other when we were 18 years old.
Wow, it's a long time.
Both played bluegrass. He came from Berkeley, California. He's a native Californian like myself. He came down to L.A. I came up to L.A. from San Diego. Both in bluegrass groups, and we met each other in a fast friendship for the last 6 years. And he was in the Desert Rose Band with me, a founding member, and he's just a wonderful guy. We're like brothers. He sings so well. He's such a great singer, and a real professional. He's a real pro up there. And we have a good time.
So when you say that you're like brothers, do you guys have the bickering then? I mean, because I know that a lot of times that like old time friends and stuff, they kind of do end up being like brothers, and you kind of have those moments of, do you have those?
No, yeah. But you know what's interesting? We do have those moments, but we also have known each other so long we know when to back off and give each other a little space. So we've sort of been through every conceivable disagreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever fight over the same woman?
Human nature.
Ever fight over the same woman in those 55 years?
No.
Okay.
No.
Legitimate question. No. Ron looks like he has something to ask.
Well, I just want to know if you're going to do It Doesn't Matter.
I can do it, but just remind me. Somebody has to remind me, and I'll do that. I don't know if it's on the current show list, but I'm happy to do that. If somebody yells a song out to me, Ron, I will attempt it, even though I haven't done it for years, and if I might mess up the lyrics. And there's many a time, and I think anybody else that does what I do, that writes songs, you'll get up there and you completely blank out on your own lyrics, and you start making up another verse on the fly. So that makes it interesting.
I won't yell Freebird then.
I couldn't even play it.
Well, actually, if anybody ever yells Freebird, Chris, here's a little idea for you. Just put your hand up there and just give them the middle finger. There's your Freebird there. Yeah. That's kind of a joke. Anyway, have you, like Ron asked about that, about that song, and I saw Motley Crue perform, 10 or 15 years ago, and I was watching Vince Neil sing, and he had forgotten the lyrics to like the songs that he sings every single day. Is it? Do you ever get that fear of stage fright, or it's fear of like forgetting, to hit the note or to say the word, or
No, I don't anymore. I just sort of run with it. And yes, I do make mistakes all the time, and either you can sort of just laugh it off or don't show it. No one will ever know anyway. Just keep going. You know, you stumble and fall, as we say. You take a solo and you take a cab ride, which means you've just completely gotten off the whole idea of the solo you're playing. But no, I enjoy it. I just get up there and go with it.
That's awesome. Living the dream. That's wonderful. Finally, I want to ask just format. What's your favorite format of music? I mean, album,
that's a
CD,
good question.
ones and
I
zeros.
I like albums, and in fact, it's funny. I got a turntable about a year ago, and started getting out all my old albums, and it was really pleasant to put those out. And the thing that was great in the older days was you'd buy an album, buy a new Beatles album, a new release, or anybody, and you'd come home and you'd put that record on the turntable, and you're listening to it for the first time, and then you're looking at the pictures and the liner notes, if there is any. But it's almost an audio-visual experience on the first run-through. And I like CDs, too, but, I mean, I have a fondness for albums because that's where I came from, so... Yeah.
Chris, I was going to say, when I come to the show, I actually have a couple of 8-tracks that I'd like you to autograph.
Oh, my God. I'd love to.
I got the Manassas and I got the McGuinn, Clark, and Hillman, the first one, and on 8-track.
So, I love it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Show's coming up on the 21st of April. It's to help out the American Legion so they can build a new hall up there in West Salem. Final, I'm gonna leave you with what is your words of encouragement to the next Byrds?
Well, I get this question. I'll be very brief because I know you have a time. But I get these questions a lot, you guys. Mr. Hillman, do you have any advice for me in my band or for me as a solo singer? Here's your 18, 19-year-old kids. I said, I do have some advice. I said, I want you to get a 4-year degree in something you really love, or learn to be an electrician or a plumber. And I said, don't stop playing music at all. Play whenever you can, then don't worry about getting paid. Just play the music and enjoy it. And if something happens, great, but you always have something to fall back on. It's not the same world as it was when I started in 63, 64. Mm-hmm. So that's my advice. Sometimes they're looking at me like I'm insane, and sometimes it gets through to them. And I think other people would say the same thing. Learn to do something you can fall back on, because it's not necessarily going to. And even this, I'll make one more statement. Even if you were very successful, you're 23 years old, you have a successful run, and it's over in a year or two. Okay, if you got the money that you were deserving, did you keep it? Did you invest it? Did you do something with it? But there's got to be, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if there's that longevity in the career anymore. I shouldn't say that. It's not a negative statement, but it's reality.
Right on.
It's reality. Enjoy the music. If I had students, I used to teach music at Yorma Calkin and formerly with the Jefferson Airplane. That great guy that used to play with him. He has a music camp in Athens, Ohio, and I would go down and teach a couple times every few years. And I'd get students age 45 to 65, and I'd say, none of you are going to have a career in music, but you're going to learn how to have fun.
Right.
You're going to learn how to go up and play for a bunch of small group of people, play at a little coffee house with holds 10 people, maybe write a song, and maybe someone will cover it someday. But you're not going to have a career in music, and that was fine with them.
That's
that was
awesome.
Understood. And I didn't want to just blow their dream out, but it was that have a good time and enjoy what you're doing. That's all. If something else happens, great.
I'm gonna leave. I hate to have to cut you off because I've enjoyed this conversation so much. But how can people find you, Chris? Do you have a website?
I do. ChrisHillman.com.
Very good, Chris. Thank you very much for being on with me. I appreciate it. I learned a lot and enjoyed the heck out of our conversation.